Now it's time for Culture Talk, where we talk about culturally relevant topics that you can use to start conversations about your faith. And I'm joined today with Michael Lewis, Director of Universe Design. Thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm excited to have you here. You actually were an atheist and you came to faith. How recent was that?
This was about 5 years ago.
5 years ago. Okay, so let's talk about that. Like, what was it that kind of kept you in atheism for most of your adulthood?
So I kind of always grew up just as an unbeliever, never really thinking there was evidence for God, and never even really caring to look. Because you would always see the Christians on the street corners that would say, "You're going to hell," with the megaphones.
Which is like super inviting, right?
Right, exactly. So my perspective on Christians, that's pretty much all it was. That was the Christians. What they believed was false, because how can Christianity be compatible with science? And then one day my wife comes to me and she says that she feels like Jesus is calling her back. And she starts going to church, and just to be nice, I'll go with her. Yeah. And I'm looking around the congregation. I'm like, yeah, I see how this is good for some people. I just don't believe it's true. Right. But once she started trying to challenge me, asking why I didn't believe. And so I hit her with the difficult questions, really hard questions that she wasn't able to answer, so much so that I was almost pulling her back away from the church.
Oh, wow.
Finally, she kind of, go ahead.
Let's dive in. What were some of those questions?
Why would God allow evil and suffering? What about evolution?
Yeah.
Isn't evolution incompatible with Christianity? Hasn't the Bible been changed over time? How do we know what we're reading today is the same text that was originally written? And how do we know that it's actually inspired by God? What about all the different religions out there? How do you know that Christianity is the one true religion? Questions like that. Yeah. And she just wasn't able to answer. So finally she kind of was like, "I'm sorry, I can't answer your questions. You're just going to have to try to discover for yourself." And she led me to a theologian, which helped answer a few. But then, as I was actually just on YouTube. I wasn't even searching anything about Christianity. And one of Hugh Ross's videos popped up. And I clicked on it, and it was the video of him going over just the creation days and his perspective on the creation days. And that moment was a moment when I thought, okay, this may have a little bit of merit behind it. And from there on, this was about a 3-year journey from that point of me just studying and trying to find answers. Trying more so to prove my wife wrong, and in the process end up proving her right. So that's kind of how my journey went. It was not a blind faith, put my all my belief into one subject or one belief system just blindly. It took a lot of research and a lot of work actually investigating the truths of Christianity. Right,
and that's something that an organization like Reasons to Believe, which produces this show, it's something that we love to hear.
Exactly.
And I love that you found that through our organization.
I did. So once I watched that video, I started watching more of Hugh's videos. And then I was diving deeper, and I ended up reading his books. And then I got into reading William Lane Craig's books. And then I was just learning that there's something actually called apologetics, something that is actually giving a defense for Christianity. And it's a great process, and something I believe everybody needs to be at least look into, so that you can help defend your faith.
Right, no, completely. And it's like if you believe or not believe, invest in that and know why you believe or know why you don't believe.
Right.
So what was kind of the tipping point for you that, I mean, was it a single tipping point, or was this collection of answers?
There was one moment that happened right before I received Christ. I had a big list of questions. This was 2 or 3 pages full of questions that my wife was sending me to a theologian to go answer. And I went to his house and met with him. Never really talked to him before, but I sat down with these 3 pages of questions and asked him one by one. Each one he went through answering every single question that I had. And I got to the end of the page, and he looks at me and he's like, "Do you believe it?" I said, "I think I do. I think I do believe." And he said, "Okay." He's like, "Then give your life to Jesus." And that moment, I don't think I really did it. That I was just kind of like, okay, I'm there. But it was actually on the car ride home when, in my head, I was like, okay, this is it. I'm giving my life to you. Wow. I'm going to put my trust in you. I do believe this is true.
Yeah, and that was how long ago?
This was 5 years ago.
Okay,
it's been about 5 years. So my whole journey has been longer than 5 years. It started before, but since I've been a Christian, it's been about 5 years.
Yeah, all right. So then, what now? Like you've done the work and you've investigated, you've found answers, and you've come to agree that God is your Savior. So now what are you doing with that?
So the moment that I gave my life to Christ, it wasn't I was no longer looking for the evidence to just prove that Christianity was true, but I got excited, and I actually wanted to know more about God. And so I studied and studied and studied, and I would take apologetic courses online and anything I could do to just get as much information in my head as I could, because I wanted to know God. I wanted to know attributes of Him, and I wanted to know everything that I could, and I would do Bible studies. And I had a huge craving to just share with people what I found, because when I talk to unbelievers, the majority of the answer, or the time when I ask them if they believe in God, the main answer I get is, I never really thought about it. It's because they're too distracted. It's tough questions that people don't really question anymore because of the distractions of life, but they're important questions.
Right.
And even with believers, when I ask them why they believe in God, well, I just have faith. But what happens when you give that answer to someone who's genuinely curious and genuinely open to looking at the evidence, and you just say, well, you just have to have blind faith? I think that all of us need to at least look into apologetics and be able to defend at least the fundamentals of what we believe, why we believe what we believe.
Right, and that is what apologetics is. So and if anyone is unfamiliar, it's the ability to defend the faith, and not like in an antagonistic way, but in a way that shares really the hope that we have.
Right.
So what would you say for anyone who's watching and they might have a loved one seeking, or they maybe aren't even investing time to seek, but they'd like to just invite them to explore? What would you say are some good ways to start a conversation?
I would say, first off, don't do what I did at the beginning and go into it and just throw up information on them. Because a lot of times you're going to be giving them a bunch of this evidence that they're probably not even questioning. So you have to ask them questions to kind of get their perspective on what they actually believe. You say, well, do you believe in God? They may say, no, I don't believe in God. We'll say, why don't you believe in God? What are some of the reasons that you don't believe? And they may give an answer like, well, I don't think science is compatible with Christianity. Science is, we know that as a fact, so Christianity can't be true. And you just kind of go at it and say, well, how did you come to that conclusion? Because then they have to think back why they actually believe what they believe. And then you can go into it after that. Once you get enough information from them, you can say, well, have you ever considered this? And that's when you can give a response. Not a reaction. Don't get hostile. Right. Even if they do, it's just give a response. And a lot of times people are open to that. I talk to unbelievers almost every day. And a lot of them are really genuinely open to at least listening. And even if it's just planting one seed with somebody in a grocery store that's wearing a shirt that you bring up, and you bring up God in that topic, even if you plant that one seed, there's no telling what God's going to do with it.
Yeah. So what would be, because you said, like, have you considered this? What would be something that you would say, have you considered this? What's that specific thing? Well,
if they say, if their response is, well, I don't think that science is compatible with Christianity, your response would be, well, first, how did you come to that conclusion? They're going to say, well, I hear it everywhere. That's what I hear, that science isn't compatible with Christianity. And you say, well, have you ever considered that it is? Because if you look at some of the accounts, the science does fit there. I mean, there are spots where it is compatible. And that's when you can kind of show them and share them with them the evidences that you've found, and also not to be scared to give responses. So one thing I would not do is, if you don't know the answer to a question that they ask, don't try to come up with it.
Right.
Just say, I don't know, but let me find out.
Right.
Because I think that's why a lot of us are scared to actually engage with unbelievers, because we're afraid they're going to ask us a question that we don't know. And the moment that they ask us that question and we can't respond, we get nervous, and then we just throw something out there.
Right.
And when you do that, it's not a good perspective from what they're seeing. It's better to just be humble and say, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question, but I can and will look into it for you.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful advice. And I love that Reasons to Believe played a role in that.
Absolutely.
All of the questions that you had, I know we have content on those questions. Yeah. So I think that's hopefully a great plug for reasons.org, and letting people know they can find answers there too.
So I actually also, within my house, I taught the Why the Universe Is the Way It Is, his course.
Yeah.
I'll bring unbelievers into my house, and surprisingly, they're open to it.
Yeah.
And Reasons, you guys have played such a huge part in my journey.
Well, thank
Absolutely.
you so much. And we're very excited for your documentary coming out. So if you'd like to hear more from Michael Lewis, go to universedesigned.com.